frameworks, write it up, apply it to this case study, and then give your views. And it did the good part of it, those that scored very well, are those that sort of, instead of just generic responses, it was really thoughtful responses in terms of the application. It was really thoughtful responses in terms of the recommendations. And even if some of the recommendations were like, okay, it doesn't quite make sense, but it doesn't matter. It shows me that there was some thought given into it and so forth, as opposed to just writing stuff with AI and sort of sticking it in there. And it's because that also, because of the widespread use of AI now, things are bland and they are sort of very generic. And if you read through it, you go like, yeah, this is, I can see you've helped, AI has helped you write this, which is okay to a certain extent. But it loses, you can see it loses a bit of its, I always think of it, it's almost like it loses its soul of the writer, the person writing it. There's no soul to it, it's just empty words, you know. And that's a challenge. It's a challenge for us as assessors, it's a challenge for us as lecturers and as facilitators to encourage you to put yourself into the writing rather than try to make it perfect. Because now with the tools that we have at our disposal, we can make things perfect and we can make it really, really good. But that's the problem. If it's really, really good and really, really perfect, then it becomes bland and just generic. And then it's not great writing. So there's those challenges that has now come into higher education, which is going to continue as these AIs are getting better and better and better to mimic the writing ability of people, and you can even give it your own writing style, and then it writes in your own handwriting style and all of that, right down to the way you make mistakes in terms of grammar and spelling mistakes. It becomes more and more difficult to assess, is this a person that wrote this, or is this a chatbot, you know? So yeah, that's just some of our challenges. So let's go through assessment 2 very quickly or briefly again. So I did give in the session 8 online class, just where I uploaded the video of last week's session, where I also just sort of answered some questions. I gave a little bit of an overview on it, and I said so the structure. So let me just touch on it briefly, and also please do jump in with questions if you have. So minimum 4,000 words, I did say that you can go over by 10%, 15%, so 4,400, 4,500. But again, that's also, oh my word, that's a lot of writing, eh? So just be, less is more, always less is more. So yeah, just be mindful of, even though I'm giving you that 10%, 15% leeway to go over, doesn't mean you have to use that amount to go over. Just to give an idea, if you're submitting a research project for a postgraduate at honors level, it's a maximum 20,000 words. So think of that. It's a research assignment that involves methodology, literature review. It involves an analysis of data and that's like 20,000. So you're getting a quarter of that just for an assignment. So just to give an idea of how much words this is relative to other submissions. A master's degree is about 50,000 words, and about a PhD is between 75 to 100,000 words. So it's a lot. It's a lot of content. So just be mindful of that. So here's a description, assessment of the aims, evaluate the ability to integrate understanding of corporate citizen principles, practices, and analytical models. So instruction. So there's two parts to it, which is the group formation part. So this is a 10%. And this is where I even suggested that you make it very short. I mean, 1 page, 1.5 pages is more than sufficient. You put a little, almost like you can even put like a little flow diagram. You can even put a little table each member's roles. You can put communication programs. You can put all of these things. I don't know whether you guys can see all of the things highlighted there. You can put all of those things in. I'm not sharing my screen.
For that, there is a process. So there is a charter. So on the module outline, they've given us the charter in the process log. So we've been using that.
Okay. And the way, yeah. So when because remember, you still have to write this up. You still have to write all of those up. So in the write-up of it, that's what I mean. When presenting this section, I don't want the log documents in the submission because again, those are going to count towards your final word count. Just write it up. Here's a list of decisions. You have a little table. Here's a list of key decisions that was made. Not more than 5 or 6 key decisions. Those are some of the challenges that we encountered. This is how we made the decision, and this is how it was resolved. A little table like that gives you all of the information that sits in that process log docs that you have. So you don't have to submit those documents. Please don't submit those documents as part of your submission. Does that make sense?
No, I'm not understanding. So do you? What? Because I assume that that's why we were given the template. So I assume that we needed to complete because the instruction says there, number 1, create a group charter, and it outlines all of that. So if you click on the group charter, it takes you to the group charter that's already outlined. And I thought that we just needed to fill in the relevant information. I wasn't aware that we needed to do a write-up.
Okay, let me have a look. Give me a moment.
So according to the module outline, if you look on page number 27, right? Okay, so it starts from page number 26 and page number 27.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a structure of submission. So when it comes to the word count, the only thing that it's asking for is the introductions, the introduction, the case study background, the perspective analysis, recommendations, reflection, and learning. So I didn't see the group formation outline in that structure. And then on that, so on the outline, that's the structure that was given to us, and that's how I did it. However, another group member structured it the way you have it on session 8. So you've got it per case and then the perspective for each case. So if we choose either one, would it be fine, or is there an expectation from your side?
That's an interesting. That's a good question, because let me put it down. Let me just have a look. So this breakdown isn't really in session 8. Isn't really a structure. It is more of what is required for every session, especially the clarity around selecting a case, because there was a question in terms of the case. How many cases do you need to select? 3. And how many perspectives do you need to select per case? And then they say you need to use all 5, and there's 3 cases. So you can then select, if it's 3 cases, the easy way to do it is just do 6 perspectives, because it's 2 perspectives per case, and you can choose which ones make makes sense for which particular case. So, for instance, the example that I used for BP was a leadership failure, because that was definitely a leadership failure. For Steinhoff, it was ethics failure, and for Volkswagen, it was was stakeholder engagement in terms of the perspective that you can use. So that's why I put that framework down, or at least that particular breakdown down there, to give clarity to the different sections in terms of how it is broken down. So my expectation is that this is what the submission looks like. If I scroll up, is that the submission looks like this is the structure of the submission. Your analysis would include the following: introduction, case study background, perspective. That's what my expectation is. This is the breakdown, and this is the format of the submission. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, that's my understanding, because one of my group members had it the other way. So they had it where, so for example, if we chose the Steinhoff case, then the structure would be, you start with, you structure it Steinhoff, you start with the background of Steinhoff, and then you do the two perspectives of Steinhoff, and then you do maybe, for example, the Lodman one, you do the background and then the perspective and then the other case. So that was the other way they structured it.
Oh, right. Okay. Both of them make sense, because last week, so what I said to in answering to that question is that if it's easier to use the case study as your anchor, as your title, so you say Lonman, and then, or Steinhoff, you give a bit of background, and it covers the case study.
That actually makes more sense.
Absolutely. Then you give a bit of background, and then say these are perspectives that I used, etc., and so forth. And then you'll have recommendations, which is recommendations then for each one of them. Okay. So each case study would have this section, that section. Yes. Highlight that in that. So so it'll be Volkswagen, and then underneath each would be the background, the perspective, the recommendations, and then it would be BP, and then case study, perspectives, analysis, etc.
Yeah, got it like that.
Yeah, for each one of them. Now that is absolutely fine. Not fine. That is how I explained it last week. Because this doesn't make sense, because you're gonna be writing little bits for each one of them, and that is where things get confusing.
Lost.
Because you're going to be writing analysis of each perspective, then you're going to be writing about Steinhoff in one paragraph, and there's Volkswagen in the next paragraph, and rather than having all of it sort of underneath each case study, gives you sort of makes tight, and then you'll have you might have a final under recommendation. You might have something that ties it all together, saying that after analyzing these three case studies, one can clearly see that there is leadership failures, management of ethics, and corporate performance seems or was the most was where it failed the most. And based on those, the recommendations are to do this and this. And that will just be 2 or 3 sentences to sort of wrap everything up, and then you can reflect on the learning. I also said 15 credible academic sources. It's going to be difficult for you to do 15. 5 or 6 based on the readings that we've done so far. And then just make sure that if you're using things like the climate change considerations, if you're going on the US UN complex considerations, those type of stuff is all on the UN websites, and a couple of key websites, especially climate change, is also on the COP website as well. So there's a lot of information that is on websites, and there are policy documents. So they're not peer-reviewed journals, but they are policy documents. So policy document is not a peer-reviewed journal article. So 5 to 6 peer-reviewed articles I would recommend. And then anything else where you're using policy documents that you're finding on the websites, just reference them clearly. Just make sure that you include the clear reference to them. And if you do find things on websites that is relevant, if you go onto the Volkswagen website or you go to, especially the Volkswagen the story, there was a lot written about it in the US press, and you'll find that there's a lot of press clippings for that. So if you search for it, you'll find there's like the Washington Post wrote the article. I know the New York Times wrote quite a big article. The Economist also wrote a big article. Now, those aren't peer-reviewed journals, but they sort of respected news sources. You're not going to use, the song as an example. You're going to use something that is more, that is a respected news source. And that's kind of where you have to sort of make a call on it. I know it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but sort of just understand that the documents from websites, UN, COP, etc., especially on the climate change stuff, and then peer-reviewed articles. We've got a list. I mean, there's quite a few of the peer-reviewed articles that we've used, especially the one or two of the textbooks, and then respected news sources. But obviously, you're not going to use 10 articles from the Washington Post or from the New York Times or from News 24. Are you going to use one or two that you can use in terms of your writing, especially as background to the case studies, because that you'll find, especially in this case of Steinhoff, you'll find quite a bit of local news that was written about it on News 24 and on a couple of other websites as well. All right, does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right, so that does clear up, I think, between the questions that you asked and everything. That does clear this up. So all of that complete and rigid clear after the project provided separately, a pre-designed route link for download and completion. Now, wait, just hold on, because that's a interesting question. I thought this section was something that we should write up and submit as part of, but I don't see it as part of the submission. So let me just see if it's okay. Here we go. You submit a group charter signed by all group members, completed process log, and the individual peer evaluation form plus your submission. Okay, so it's all three. It's all four documents. Now let me go on to the peer evaluation form. I raised a question last week, and I asked the question if it's because I can do what I've done in the past with group work, and I find it a bit more, I find it a bit more useful, especially where feedback is concerned. But I see this does cover quite a bit. Sometimes it's easier to give anonymous feedback than to give feedback like this. But I think for what the assignment is, in terms of about transparency and about communication, and the whole course is about ethics. Having a discussion with each group member while you're completing this is a good idea. And I would encourage you to, before you submit the group feedback, is to have a little session, a little online session. And I know this is sometimes difficult because not everyone is open to receiving feedback. To have that little session and give each other the feedback, say, listen, this is what I wrote about you. And sometimes it's good, the good things and the bad, I won't say the bad things, the challenges. You can say, part of, in working with you, I found you very open, you were very responsive, you, etc., etc. You give some good feedback, you communicated well. But there was times in which we were trying to get hold of you to set up a meeting, and you just didn't come back to us, and it was a bit frustrating. And at times like those, I just felt you could have, even just, communicated a bit more clearly. Things like those are important for us, one, as people, as persons, but also as an opportunity for growth, for future work, and especially for some of you that are already working adults, working in environment, the professional working environment, and some of you that are not working and are full-time students. Feedback like this is very good, and it's very valuable. So I would suggest that you do set up some time. You maybe after submission of the form, or maybe before the submission of the evaluation forms, and you give that feedback. So you don't have to share the form, although you can if you want to. But I would just say, just in a general way, give feedback, because once again, it is what I see and how I perceive you is different from what you internalize and how you reflect on your own work. For instance, there's quality of work. You rate yourself a 5, but then you rate the other members a 3 and a 4. And under initiative and leadership, etc., etc. But once again, you don't need to go through all of the categories. It's maybe a good idea to just give general feedback in a general way, rather than going through each one of this, and then the argument comes, I don't think it was a 3, I think it was more of a 4, or why didn't you give me a 5? And you don't want that discussion. It shouldn't be about numbers. I perceived you while I was working with you. This is what you did well, and these are the areas that I think that we need to work on. And for some, as I said earlier, for some of you that are working in a professional environment at the moment, some of this feedback might be very good for those that are full-time students that are not working full-time as part of their growth. So just think of it in that particular way. I know group assignments are not often fun. Or sometimes they don't work out too well. In terms of this class, there was already 2 groups that had issues, and 1 group had to be broken up. So there was conflict. There was groups that didn't work too well. So I would suggest that. You don't have to do it, but I would suggest that, and that's also a good part of your own growth as well. All right, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not easy, but I would it's a wonderful learning opportunity outside of just doing the assignment. Good. Comprehensive law, good decisions, purpose and scope, case studies. Right. Let's go through this marking guideline. That's clear. Please make sure that for the process log and the group charter and the peer evaluation forms, once you've completed it, just convert them to PDFs to upload. It's a lot easier to upload in PDFs, and also turn it in, do read it differently when it's a PDF rather than a Word document as well. All right. Are there any other questions just generally on assessment 2?
No, it's all good from my side, thanks.
Good. No, thank
Yes,
you.
so nothing from my side either.
Okay, correct. Awesome. Then in that case, thank you very much, everybody. I will also upload the session as well, and thank you for the questions. They were really they were good, and also sort of made me sort of think about how I communicate. Because sometimes in your mind you go, no, I fully understand it, but the students don't hear it in the same way. So good. Thank you very much for that, Rafia, for clarifying that. Okie dokes. All right, guys. Have a good evening. Thank you very much for signing on.
Bye, sir.
Thank you, CEO. Have a good
All right.
evening, everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Good. Bye.